Did you know that the man who invented shopping malls hates shopping malls? More on that later. First, we have to talk about the suburbs. After World War II, America had an economic boom along with a high demand for housing. This led to the beginning of the suburban experiment. Mass-produced single-family homes were built on huge swaths of land, and residents would need a car to get anywhere. Today, we are on the third generation of the suburban experiment, but many of the problems still exist today. In a traditional mixed-use neighborhood, all points of interest and amenities such as theaters, parks, and grocery stores are within walking distance. This encourages people to get out and explore their city on foot, leading to social interactions and a lively community. Meanwhile, modern suburbia is mostly stale and isolating. Since everything requires a car to get to, there's rarely anyone walking outside. There's no social space or town square to build community. It's a sea of asphalt and single-family homes. The lack of local amenities and monotonous environment leads to people reconstructing the world in their own homes. Suburbanites build man caves, backyard pools, indoor theaters, an entire miniature replica of Paris? Okay, fine, this one's kinda cool. But there are also attempts at recreating the traditional development pattern of cities. Think of Main Street in Disneyland or the Grand Canal shops in Las Vegas. I've visited both of these places before, and yeah, they're great. But in most of North America, nice places like this are only found in theme parks and indoor malls, while in other countries, they're all over the city. America used to have walkable places like this, but today, all we have are artificial replicas. It's hard to really appreciate these places when they're ultimately fake. There's a term for this, and it's called Disneyfication, the commercial transformation of environments into simplified, controlled, and sanitized versions. It describes the process of stripping away the original character of something and turning it into an idealized, tourist-friendly manner. This term was of course derived from Disney World, which pioneered these heavily controlled environments. But Walt Disney didn't actually intend Disneyland to be the way it is. In the 1960s, many people were concerned with the decay of American cities. Poverty, crime, and traffic were on the rise, and as the nation continued its suburban experiment, many were concerned about suburban sprawl and the wasteful land use of the suburbs. Among these people were Walt Disney, and he wanted to create a model or a blueprint for how future cities should be built. So he created the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, otherwise known as EPCOT.
We call it EPCOT.
This city was going to be human-centered, focusing on new urbanist principles such as walkability, density, transit, and sustainability.
Here the pedestrian will be king, free to walk and browse without fear of motorized vehicles.
These ideas may sound familiar today, but back in the 1960s, this was radical. This was during a time when cities all around the world were bulldozing entire neighborhoods to run highways through them. So this can only mean one thing. Walt Disney was a time traveler. His original plan was going to consist of a central commercial district surrounded by high-rises and single-family homes. Residents would commute using a web of monorails converging in the center, while cars and trucks would be moved underground. Every last detail was meticulously thought about, implementing concepts such as Jane Jacobs' Eyes on the Streets and Ebenezer Howard's Garden City. Although not perfect, EPCOT was going to be a compact, walkable city with proper transit-oriented development.
So this is EPCOT, the heart of Disney World.
But after Walt Disney passed away in 1966, his company turned EPCOT into a theme park. So today, EPCOT is just a part of Disney World, an attraction to escape to. What was once a symbol of innovation and vision to change American cities is now a watered-down tourist attraction taken over by the suburban sprawl he was trying to fix in the first place. I was actually surprised to learn about this history behind Disney World because it is shockingly similar to the history behind shopping malls. Like Walt Disney, Austrian architect Victor Gruen saw many problems with the American suburbs. He called it an unfit, unlivable environment that is inefficient and ugly. He even referred to suburban commercial strips as avenues of horror. So he developed a plan for a high-density mixed-use district full of houses, shops, and offices. It would even include a medical center, school, and an artificial lake. At the center of all of this was the Southdale Shopping Center, the world's first enclosed shopping mall with a variety of stores, public art installations, and sidewalk cafes, simulating the lively pedestrian environments of a European street. Gruen himself disliked shopping, so he didn't want this to just be some bubble of consumerism, but rather a social, cultural, and civic hub for the community, a centralized place to relax and socialize. He wanted to bring Vienna-style urbanism to the American suburbs. When the mall opened in 1956, it was a massive hit. 40,000 visitors on opening day and 75,000 more on the following weekend. This was a huge indoor palace of retail, containing fountains, sculptures, glass mosaics, and even tropical plants. It was an attraction on par with Disneyland. In fact, Walt Disney cited the shopping mall as an inspiration for EPCOT. By 1960, 4,500 shopping malls had opened across the country, an average of 3 per day. By the 1980s, over 1,000 were being built every year. But despite the success, Gruen hated what he had made, because his vision didn't actually fully go through. There was a tragic downgrading of quality. The retail company he worked with, Dayton, decided to just eliminate all the mixed-use development around the mall that was in Gruen's original plan, leaving Southdale Center as an isolated building surrounded by suburban sprawl and massive parking lots. In fact, when Southdale Center opened, architect Frank Lloyd Wright toured the mall, to which he was quite disappointed. You've got a garden court that has all the evils of a village street and none of its charm. You should have left downtown, downtown. Just like Disney's EPCOT, Victor Gruen's plan was supposed to transform American cities, but ended up as a watered-down attraction for suburbanites. Gruen wanted a shopping mall to be more than just consumerism. He wanted to create a community hub that brought life to the suburbs, but instead, it became a part of the suburbs itself. Victor Gruen invented the shopping mall to make America more like Vienna. He ended up making Vienna more like America. Today, suburban shopping malls are dying. A quarter of all malls in the US are expected to shut down by 2025. Malls rely on their anchor stores to attract visitors. These are those big box stores usually occupied by large brands like Walmart. But when these companies move away, they leave behind a massive abandoned space that remains empty for an indefinite amount of time. These usually don't find new tenants for a while, as you need a large enough company to fill in that space. So without people living near the mall as Gruen had originally envisioned, less and less visitors will come to the mall, leading to smaller stores inside shutting down. This starts a domino effect where more and more businesses close as less people visit, until eventually the entire mall dies. Compare this to a traditional mixed-use neighborhood where residents live within walking distance or even right on top of stores, meaning there will always be foot traffic to sustain these businesses, even if one of them closes. And because these stores are smaller and don't sit behind massive parking lots, it's much easier for another business to fill in vacancies. This is why malls in downtowns, or in basically any other country, are still thriving. For example, the Eaton Center in downtown Toronto is the busiest shopping mall in North America. This is not surprising given how highly accessible it is by foot and public transit. You don't need to drive here. In fact, you probably wouldn't want to. The mall is deeply interconnected with dozens of other buildings through underground pathways, and serves as a connection hub when taking the metro or streetcars. This means there will always be high amounts of foot traffic through the mall, even if most people don't intend to buy anything. And when a large retail store closes, which did happen recently, the mall won't be shutting down anytime soon. For thousands of years, we've built cities where people walked. Even when we connected our cities by trains or built streetcar networks, majority of all trips were made on foot. But this all changed in the mid-20th century through the suburban experiment. We all of a sudden started building cities where everyone drove cars. This might seem like progress, that humans used to walk everywhere, so we built cities around walking, and now we're a species that drives everywhere, so we build cities around cars. Following this logic, humans will eventually all be flying in jetpacks and teleporting everywhere, and our cities will be shaped around that. But this mindset is comforting. We want to think in the narrative of progress, but the reality is not so simple. When you look at the way cities are designed all around the world, you'll find they are eerily similar. No matter the age, size, culture, or population, every city around the world follows the same traditional pattern of development. They're built at a human scale, distances are walkable, and there is a mix of uses. The architecture and building materials may be different, but even that's starting to look the same. You might think this way of designing cities is primitive or outdated, but this approach was developed over thousands of years of trial and error. For centuries, different societies experimented and refined this way of building cities. Some failed while others succeeded, and this knowledge was passed down generations. Through this extensive trial and error, our ancestors optimized the way we build cities to fit the social, cultural, and financial complexities of human lives. Contrast this to the suburban experiment, which is exactly that, an experiment. This development pattern was not formed over thousands of years of trial and error, but rather invented less than a century ago. We did not do a pilot project, nor did we apply this at a smaller scale first to see if it would work. We simply transformed the entire continent overnight. The death of shopping malls is just one example of how unsustainable the suburban experiment is. They try to replicate the traditional style of development, but are stripped down to mere consumerism rather than places to live. This is the Disneyfication of American cities. Walkable neighborhoods that are healthy, lively, and social have become a commodity, transformed into controlled, sanitized, and commercialized environments. The reason Disneyland's Main Street is so nice is because it has all the features of well-designed streets that you would find all around the world. It's wide and car-free, lined with beautiful buildings with shops and cafes, and there's plenty of outdoor seating for dining. These places were once a natural part of our cities, but are now just attractions. There's nothing wrong with Disneyland or malls in particular, but when the rest of the city lacks these walkable places, your only way of experiencing them are in these private commercialized environments. The problem is that modern suburbia is inherently car dependent. Trying to build a walkable environment in the suburbs is fruitless when suburbanites need to drive everywhere. This is why the main streets that do exist in the suburbs are always just one strip of stores surrounded by massive amounts of parking. But we don't need to build an entirely new type of city like Walt Disney's EPCOT. What we should be doing is revitalizing the main streets that we already have, densifying and pedestrianizing these city core so that they are actually nice places where people want to live. When you look at examples of this in other parts of the world, you can really see the resemblance to Disneyland's Main Street or suburban shopping malls. The difference is that these are actually real places where people live, and not artificial replicas that only serve to make you buy stuff. Beautiful places don't have to be limited to expensive theme parks or giant indoor buildings. They can just be places. You'll often hear the excuse that most Americans want to live in car-dependent suburbia, but the popularity of Disneyland and shopping malls shows that people love walkable places like this, and would pay hundreds of dollars to experience them. By improving our cities to be more walkable, mixed-use, and human scale, we can turn them into the social, cultural, and community hubs that Disney and Gruen had originally envisioned. Maybe Frank Lloyd Wright was indeed right. Downtown should have been left downtown.